So for number 13, we are taking a true conditional sentence, and then we're trying to give examples of when the converse, contrapositive, when they're true and when they're false. So before we can decide what that sentence is going to be, we need to fill out the truth table for the conditional, if P then Q, for the converse, if Q then P, and for the contrapositive, if not Q, then not P. So let's fill that out. So for the conditional, I have if we're looking at the first and the second column. So if P, then Q. So if P is true and Q is true, then this one is true. If P is true and Q is false, that is false. If P is false and Q is true, that is true. And if they're both false, it is true. Now let's do the truth table for the converse. So once more, when they're both true, this is true. When Q is false and P is true, that is true. When Q is true and P is false, that is false. And then lastly, we have false, false, so that is true. And let's do the contrapositive. So if not Q, then not P. So if not Q is false and not P is false, they have the same truth values. That is true. If not Q is true and not P is false, it means that the promise is broken, so false. If not Q is false, then the antecedent is false, so we can say this is automatically true. And if not Q is true and not P is true, that is true. So we can see that the truth tables for the conditional equals the contrapositive, right? So I'll just write this down. The conditional is equivalent to the contrapositive. Okay, and now we're ready to see. Is it possible for A, is it possible to have a true conditional sentence where the converse is true? So let's see. So we're going to compare these lines, right? And we're going to see that over here, maybe I'm going to do this in a different color, with pink maybe. We can see that in the first line here, oh, that was a terrible choice because it hit out our pink. Maybe I'll just say the first one. So in the first line over here, I'll point at it with an arrow, we can see that the conditional is true and the converse is true, right? And also in the fourth line, the conditional is true and the converse is true. So they're both true either when P and Q are true or when P and Q are both false, right? So we can just give an example where P and Q are true. So maybe we can say if P is true, right? So we can say if 1 is an odd number, which is true, then 2 is an even number, also true, right? So this would be a case where the conditional is true and the converse is true. Let's do B. So for B, we're looking at cases where the conditional is true and the converse is false. Now, we can see that the only way where this would be possible would be in the third line here, where, and let's see, for this to happen, for the conditional to be true and the converse to be false, it means that P is false and Q is true, right? So let's put a statement where P is false and Q is true. So I'm going to say if P has to be a false statement. So I'm going to say if 7 is greater than 12, which is false, right? Then 1 is less than 3, which is true. So once more, the conditional, the conditional is true and the converse is false when P is false, and Q is true. Let's do item C. The contrapositive is false. So let's look at it. Since the conditional and the contrapositive are equivalent, right? There's no way that I'm going to find there's no row where my conditional is true and my contrapositive is false. They will always have the same truth value. So whenever the conditional is true, the contrapositive will be true. So we will say here, not possible. Not possible. And lastly, for item D, where the contrapositive is true. Now, since the conditional is equivalent to the contrapositive, we're going to find that the conditional is true and the contrapositive is true in the first line, in the third line, and in the fourth line. So it could be when P and Q are both true, where P and Q are both false, or when P is false and Q is true. So maybe we'll use now a case where they're both false. So I'm going to say here, if Paris is in Brazil, which is false, then humans have 8 eyes, which is also false. And that would meet criteria. And in this case, the conditional would be true and the contrapositive would be true. But you could have chosen any other combinations except for the second line, and it would have given you a correct statement.